Welcome, everybody. We are here with Nikki Ott, who is an EBLI teacher extraordinaire. And many of you know her from our EBLI members Facebook page because she is so generous with her support and help for all of you. And we're going to talk more about that too. But Nikki has just the best story and this evolution of how she's gotten to where she has with EBLI and a whole lot of great suggestions and recommendations and all kinds of great things for those of you who teach EBLI in person or online. And she does teaching instruction in tutoring, private practice, but this information is also very good for those of you who teach in a classroom. So lots of good stuff coming here. So Nikki, if you could just kind of start out and tell us a bit about your story and how you came to where you are today as far as this literacy instruction.
My story started the same way as a lot of people, same as yours. It started with love of family. Reading struggles have been in our family for longer than I've been alive. My father is profoundly dyslexic. My daughter is. I have two children. My son learned to read very easily. I would call him a super reader. I mean, he was reading at 4 and 5 years old, no problem. And then my daughter came along and I did not understand why it was so hard for her. You know, like so many others, she's very intelligent but struggled. So I did all the same things with her I did with my son. I taught letter sounds, phonics skills, blending, but she was always behind. She always struggled. I would say behind 2 or 3 years. And no matter how much we worked with her, it was just, she would just slowly progress, but was always behind. And I remember working in the kids' classrooms, and I was able to help all the other children in the classroom come up to grade level reading, but for some reason my daughter was still behind. And that was very frustrating to me. I thought I'm helping all these other people, but I can't help my daughter. And I didn't know anything about dyslexia. So she needed vision therapy, and it was suggested by one of her teachers, and she really did need it. But of course they told me, oh, that'll fix all her reading problems, right? So that's the common thing. And I believed it. We went through vision therapy and I thought she's going to catch up, but she's behind. So I got her an Orton Gillingham tutor for a year, and I paid for that. The tutor came to the school, but I didn't really see discernible progress. And I thought, well, I'm going to give her another year. And then now it's the end of her 4th grade year, and she's still behind by a couple years. Nobody had suggested to me that she had dyslexia, not her teachers, not her tutor. Nobody ever said that to me. And, I thought I knew what dyslexia was, but I didn't. So my daughter, being the intuitive person she is, she sent me a text message when she was 15. And all it said was, do you think I might be dyslexic? And I mean, that just shocked me. My first gut reaction was, well, no. But then I thought,
what made her ask that? Do you know?
She has ADHD, and I think she read that it's somewhat common for these two things to go together. And she was like, well, maybe that explains why I struggle with reading. So that's what made her send me the message. And I thought, well, if your child says that to you, you should, something like that, you should probably take it seriously. So I thought, well, I'll read about dyslexia. And as soon as I did, everything that I thought I knew about dyslexia was wrong. I believed all the myths. And when I read about it, I was like, oh yeah, you are definitely dyslexic. And
what can you tell me, like 3 of the things that popped out were like, oh my gosh, that's her? Remember?
I don't know, it's so long. She couldn't. I realized as I was reading it, her real problem was segmenting. I didn't really know what that was. I knew about blending, but I didn't know about segmenting. And I realized as I was reading about it and thinking about how she tried to spell words, I realized she had been memorizing them. And I would be like, I would even ask her, don't you hear that sound in the middle? And she'd be like, she would kind of give me this blank look. And I didn't realize that people had trouble with this. So the connections didn't quite make it until I started reading about dyslexia. And I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Why she couldn't learn to spell any words in school. They give you the spelling unless you take the list on. I don't think she learned to spell one word that way in 4 years.
Did she do well on her spelling test?
Yeah, she would get A's and B's, mostly B's, but she did
never be able to spell them right.
No,
in writing, or
forget every single one of them. So, and she said later, oh, I was just memorizing the symbols in the order that they were given to me. That was it. It didn't mean anything to her, really.
A lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. So I also realized my father is profoundly dyslexic. If you can think, I mean, he has many language deficits. So my daughter, I would consider probably somewhere in the moderate range. My father definitely in the severe. So as soon as I realized what the problem was, I was like, well, there's a solution. And of course, I thought it was Orton Gillingham. You know, that's what I always heard. So I went straight to Orton Gillingham. We started Barton's reading and spelling program. And Maddie flew through the first two levels. By that point, she was, I would say, 70% remediated anyway. But she flew through it, and I was like, this is kind of overkill for her. So I stopped. But my father, it took a long time to get through the first couple levels. And when he got to the spelling rules, it was excruciating to watch him try to learn the rules and apply them. And I realized that at some point while we were doing this, that if he just didn't think about the rules, he would spell the words right most of the time. Finally, one day, in just total exasperation, I just said, forget about the rules, just spell the words the way, just listen for the sounds and spell the words. And he's right more than 90% of the time if he did that. And I would ask him, why did you spell that word that way? And he would just kind of shrug his shoulders. I don't know, that's just the way I think it's supposed to be spelled with the sounds.
Yeah.
And then he would just pick out the correct spelling for a sound. And I was just like, how does he even know that? So I realized he's not going to make it through. So I threw out a Hail Mary, and I can't believe I posted this on the Barton Tutors Facebook group, believe it or not, but it was like, my father's not going to make it through Barton's program. I need something else. And one person suggested EBLI in Phono-Graphix. And I'd heard about EBLI. I didn't know anything about it, but coincidentally, Erin Duncan, a couple days later, she was sponsoring a 4 or 5 part webinar for parents on reading reflex. So I got the book. I'd read the book through before the first parent webinar. And by the second one, I'd read it through twice. And I'd already signed up for the certification class for Phono-Graphix. Because when I read the book, I was like, this could work. It just makes sense.
That was my start, by the way. It's very way back 25 years ago, that same book.
It breaks my heart. I didn't realize this 10 years earlier, but we got to let that go, right? Yeah. So I was like, this will work. And I stopped the parent webinars because I was in the certification class. And then I started Phono-Graphix not too long after I started the course with both my daughter and my father, and he took off. My daughter, of course, did very well. I wasn't surprised by that at all. I figured she would do well with it, but my dad took off. I was truly shocked at the transformation of him just in a month or two with Phono-Graphix and what he was able to do. And then in July, Donna, and I hope I say her name right, is it Hetmanic?
Hetmanic, yep.
Did I say it right? Okay,
yeah, it's a tricky one. That's a good tough set to do, EBLIize that one.
Yeah, right. She invited my dad and I to a 3-day EBLI workshop that you and Cricket were hosting. And I really wanted to see you teach live. And I wanted my dad to have a chance to heal emotionally. I mean, this man has suffered 70 years of trauma. For those that don't know, he learned to read between the ages of 75 and 76, and he tried all his life. He never gave up. He kept trying, but he could never get past a 3rd grade reading level.
Such a sweet man he is also. And he was a teacher, right?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how he graduated college reading the 3rd grade level, but he did. He's a smart man.
Alone, for sure, yeah.
So we went to that EBLI workshop, and I was already certified as a Phono-Graphix instructor. So I had no intention of taking EBLI training, because to me, I thought, well, EBLI is based on Phono-Graphix. Why would I need EBLI training, right? Well, by the end of the first day, I realized it was superior to Phono-Graphix, and I was signed up for training before the workshop ended, and I regretted it. So I finished up both my daughter and my dad with EBLI activities. And I don't know, Dad did maybe 6 weeks of it, and then he was done. He's doing great.
That's so exciting. Yeah, that was a fun, interesting, exciting 3 days for sure. We didn't know. We're like, Donna, we don't know what's the taste of EBLI. Okay, we'll kind of figure something out and make it up. But having those two, we had an adult and then a teenager, as you know, that taught in front of the class, and then you guys it was just such a dynamic group. That was such an experience. Those 3 days was really very beautiful with a lot of amazing people. Okay, so I have a question. What did you do before? Like, what was did you work? Did you have a job in education? What did you do before you started teaching?
I believe, well, believe it or not, by profession, I'm a computer programmer. So I've done that for, I don't know, 30 plus years, something
Wow.
like
So this was the reading instruction stuff was on top of that, has been on top of that.
that. Right.
Is it still? Do you still do that?
I volunteer my time with programming, but I don't do that as I don't get paid for it. I will tell you, I enjoy teaching more than I do program.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So now, so you taught your dad, you taught your daughter, and then what happened next?
Well, I also had a couple other students of children of friends. So I was teaching them with structured literacy and I moved them over to Phono-Graphix and they also took off. So then I just started taking on more and more students and it took me maybe a month to switch everybody over. I was kind of doing a Phono-Graphix EBLI mix before I started the EBLI training. And then once I started EBLI training, I just moved everybody over to EBLI. So I've been doing that ever since.
And that's been, gosh, well, it's been a year. Now we're in September. So that was a year, 14 months ago, probably.
That sounds right.
It seems like you've been doing it forever, doesn't it?
It does, but it's really not that long.
It's pretty crazy. And also, for people who don't know, for 4 years, I was a Phono-Graphix trainer. That's what I did. You know, in EBLI, I always was focusing on schools and classroom teachers. And that was really where my focus was, because like your daughter, my daughter got by and she, you know, she actually was gifted and talented and looked like she was a good fake reader and a good fake speller, you know, but couldn't transfer it to anything. And so that's why I did reading reflex. And then I ended up getting trained by Carmen and Jeff McGinnis. And I was a trainer within like 3 months because I've been teaching it for quite a bit too. So I trained for 4 years and then realized, you know, it wasn't really, teachers were like, I'm not cutting up all that stuff in those 36 drawers and doing all that, you know, it wasn't transferable in the way that teachers were just like, mm-mm. And I was real desperate to get something that was going to be, you know, applicable across the board, but also more with writing too, and more with, you know, vocabulary, just a more comprehensive type of thing. So I am forever grateful to Phono-Graphix though, for my start, which I'm sure you are too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that was just, I am very, very thankful to that and Diane McGinnis in her book and all too. So yeah, it's quite an interesting, you know, story that you have, which is exciting. So I want you to talk a little bit, if you will, about how did you start? I mean, you're just so gracious and generous with your support and so loving and kind and, you know, in reaching out for everybody who is on, you know, our members Facebook page and even the EBLI community. Tell me a little bit about that and how that kind of unfolded and what that looks like when you're doing that.
I guess I feel like people help me along the way, so I want to pay it forward. And it can be so overwhelming at first. I remember just, you know, when I learned that my family had dyslexia, I probably spent 1,000 hours that first year, all in structured literacy in Orton Gillingham. And I felt it was so hard. It was such a hard way to go that when I came to EBLI, Phono-Graphix and EBLI, it was like this weight was lifted off of me. And it was just so much easier to teach. It was easier to learn. And I hate to see other people having to go through that struggle without any help.
Yeah.
I want to help them take that weight off as quickly as I can.
Even that suffering, because as a parent, if you're a parent and working with your kids, you know, it's hard to explain. I get chills, even now, 25 years later, what that does to your crushing your soul when your child is struggling so much and you're doing everything. And, you know, the parents, so many of them too, from Orton Gillingham to EBLI, my thing was like, I want this to get to every teacher so they can get to every child and every parent, anybody who needs it so that they can do that. And you have had that. And also that it's almost traumatic, I would say. I think that's a pretty, you know, good word to use for those teachers and educators and homeschoolers and parents who are shifting from an OG based, you know, to EBLI. It's really a hard shift. So what do you think are the main things that you do that help ease that transition?
For other people?
Yeah, for other people that you.
Well, one of them is in the do's and don'ts about
Yes, I'm going to go through those too. So, all right, you want to go through those? I'm
Sure.
going to.
Yeah.
So we've got, and we'll share this, and I know I've shared it on the September 2023 coaching call too, but I mean, this is just really, really delightful and so insightful for me because I don't have any background whatsoever in Orton Gillingham. And so in the last year and a half, when we had so many hundreds of people that have shifted from OG to EBLI, I've been like, I don't really know where you're coming from because it was always so kind of shrouded. We only had maybe a handful of people in the first 20 some years that were OG. So it's been a learning experience for me. So I think it's really cool for you who had both of those experiences, to be even better supportive than we are. So your first thing is, what are some stumbling blocks to successful EBLI instruction is what this says. So the first one is, and if you could just talk a little bit about this and your shift in it too. So failing to recognize the shift in thinking. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes,
What
and
do
I'm
you
probably
share
going to
about
go over to the other side, which is kind of its counterpart too,
that? Okay.
about how EBLI is a process. I feel like, especially even sometimes with people who've been through the full training, what they don't get is the overview. They don't really understand how EBLI works. So they're still trying to look at it through the lens of a structured literacy Orton Gillingham type. And as long as they're doing that, they're not going to truly understand what's happening or why things are done the way they are in EBLI. Like, why do we only have 8 sound sorts? And why are there only, let me see, hope I say this right, same spelling, different sound sorts? There's 8 of those. That blew me away. Even though I had been Phono-Graphix trained, that one was a really hard, I hit a brick wall on that one for a little while. And I had to get to the point where I was like, I'm just going to trust and do it and see. And it wasn't until I really saw it happening that I understood what was going on, because I started to understand what EBLI is actually doing. So
how long do you think that took? Because that almost everybody says it doesn't matter what you say to us, what we see, what we watch, until you go through it to some point. At what point, there's 140 activities,
right.
however
I
many
think I was
lessons.
about a quarter to a third of the way through with a couple students. And it wasn't until I saw how they reacted to the program and what I saw what they were able to do, that it hit me what was actually happening. So until that, I just couldn't quite understand.
How do
Why
you
is it you would
explain
say
that?
not everybody would have to go through all 140
Yeah.
activities? Why are we only explicitly 8 sounds? So I'll just go into the process, and hopefully this helps somebody out there.
Oh, I'm sure it will. It's very insightful to me also, and I really, really appreciate it. So yes, go for it.
This is the one thing I wish every new EBLI trainee could understand before they start. So hopefully I do it justice. I don't know. So first I want to say, when I'm talking about the timeline, it's going to be 2nd grade and above. It's the same process for K and 1. It just takes longer because we have to build some more foundational skills before we get to where the 2nd graders start. So just understand, same process, but I'm going to do the 2nd and above.
Okay.
So in the first 3 sessions, it's a little bit overwhelming to most people what happens in the EBLI sessions. The first thing that happens is we start teaching them the 4 foundational principles of the written code. So we teach it to them, so it takes the mystery and secrecy out of the code. They just understand it on a fundamental level. And do we need to go through those 4 principles or just keep going?
You can keep going, because I think that this is mostly for EBLI trained people, so they
okay, good. All right, so we're teaching them the 4 foundational principles. So they're not surprised by anything they see in the code. The second thing that starts to happen very early on, maybe the 2nd session, is we start applying those principles to a simplified version of reading and spelling multisyllable words. So they're already starting to apply them. EBLI's process for multisyllable words is much simpler. It's less scary, seems more doable to the children, so they're not as intimidated. Then at the exact same time, we're also introducing authentic text. And that's another stumbling block to a lot of people, authentic text that early. So let's talk about why that is okay. We taught them how the code works. We taught them simplified reading and spelling multisyllable words. So we got to authentic text, and let's say they're going to be introduced to grapheme phoneme combinations they haven't seen. And that's where a lot of people object. But let's say they're reading the word light, and you're like, okay, you just underline IGH and you just say I. And then they combine those 3 sounds, light. Well, they're not surprised. They're not surprised that IGH is the I sound because we've already taught them that every sound can be 1, 2, 3, or 4 letters, and every sound is represented different ways. So the sound I could be IGH, it could be I don't know, it could be
IE, like in pie, yeah,
yeah.
Y. I can
So
fly.
it can be spelled many different ways. So they already know this, so they're not surprised by it. So in the authentic text, they actually start teaching themselves the code. So
I
that's the
think that is
amazing
one of the
thing.
biggest powers. That's just so, it's like, this is like mind blowing kind of thing to the adults more so. And the kids are like, dang, this is the
Yes,
bomb, right? Because they're like, I'm getting it. This makes sense. But the adults are like, wait a minute, I'm not getting it.
right.
What's going on
I
here?
know.
It's
And
a
I
little
tell a lot
freaky.
of the people I talk to, your kids are going to have no trouble with this. You're the one that's going to
Yeah.
struggle. You're going to struggle with the shift in how reading and
Yeah.
spelling is taught, but your kids are going to take off. And they're like, okay, okay. So,
Yeah.
and I try to explain this process to them. So basically what's happening is the self-learning or self-teaching cycle has now begun. It's the
Right.
very
Boom.
beginnings
Yeah.
of that. So as they're reading authentic text and you're exposing them to new grapheme phoneme combinations, they're actually learning on their own. And that really is the goal of every EBLI teacher and tutor, is to
Yeah.
start that self-learning cycle, which makes sense because we cannot teach them the tens of thousands of words that they have to learn. At some point, they have to start teaching themselves.
Right. And that self-teaching, it's just, it's, and even to me after 25 years, it still is like I'm flabbergasted. Like, how is this possible? Especially for those, and I know you've had them too, that I'm not going to say in time, but so quickly it just, you're like, how is this possible? How they just many kids, boom, and then they just go. And like, I get this, it's kind of like some kids ride a bike a lot faster, than others without you holding on, and they just start flying. And it's just like, wow. So I think that is just such a huge piece, and getting them into that authentic text and doing it immediately so that they can apply what they've learned for sure. Now, your next thing with a stumbling block is expecting too much of yourself, too much from yourself, expecting too much from yourself. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Yeah, I think people read about the more experienced EBLI teachers and tutors and the success they have, and they think, I'm going to have that right away.
Mm-hmm.
You probably aren't. Not right away. You know what I mean? You will see progress, but you need to understand that, you don't expect your children to master something the first time you show it to them. So adults don't master things immediately either. So it's a little bit of a bumpy process at first, but you get experience and you just get better and better and better and faster at teaching it, and it will become easy. And then you will be one of the ones getting success.
And that's the whole thing. Like your first child through that you're taking, your first class or group or whatever, it's like, and,
right.
And then the next time you're like, dang, by the third time through, you're like, I'm getting to be a pro here. But it's just getting over that hump, and it's just so easy. It's almost easier for people like me who have no background in education, that got into this. It's like, oh, well, this just makes total sense, and I don't have any undoing. It's just like you have a child who's guessing or is kind of stuck by rules or syllable types or letter names or any, whatever, looking at the picture, and they're stuck by that. And even if they know that that's not really helping them move forward, it's a habit that they've acquired that it takes time to undo. And I think people giving themselves grace that have taught a different way to, oh my gosh, I just did that. Well, whoops. And and we all make mistakes. Everybody's going to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But giving yourself grace for that, I think, is really important. And that paradigm shift is big.
It is. It is big. But my suggestion is, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and laugh at yourself when you make mistakes. I laugh at myself with the kids all the time. I'm like, look, teachers make mistakes too. Look at that. I spelled that wrong.
And they're always they're always still correcting me, like, oh, you did that. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. I did. Thank you. And that's exciting. And I always tell them, we're all learning all the time. I'm still learning. We're all going to always be learning, but which is pretty cool. So partial buy-in, what are you talking about there? Stumbling back to success, partial buy-in.
Well, it's people that haven't understood the EBLI process, and they can't get over the authentic text or the pacing or the fact that we're only doing 8 sounds. So things like that. So they might try to alter the program, or they try to use these activities with their current reading program. And I'm like, don't do it. At least try it with fidelity a few times and see what happens. And
Yeah.
that's what I had to do, because I was struggling with we're only doing 8 sounds. And I just said, you know what? Nora's been right about so many things. I'm just going to do it. That is really where I was. And when I got through about a third of the way with a couple students and the light bulb went off and I saw what was happening, I was like, oh, now I get it.
How long did it take you? Like you said, you did a combination. You probably did a combination of OG and Phono-Graphix, then Phono-Graphix and EBLI, to shift. How do you think that was like a couple kids or pretty quickly? I don't know how that was.
Well, I was already tutoring.
Right.
So as soon as I learned Phono-Graphix, I switched over to Phono-Graphix. And then I went to that EBLI workshop. So I learned a couple EBLI activities. I was like, ooh, these are better than the way Phono-Graphix does it. So I immediately started doing those activities. And then I started EBLI training. So I was probably doing a mixture for about a month. And then as I got far enough in my training with EBLI, I started flipping students over to EBLI.
Yeah. And
so maybe a month.
Okay. Well, that's pretty reasonable for sure. All right. The next point you have here is the kids can't handle the pace. This is a very significant, or maybe I don't think they can handle the pace.
Right. That's another stumbling block, because they're so used to mastery, all these other programs with mastery, that it's hard to realize that we don't really need to teach to mastery. We need to teach them to good, teach something else, and they will get to mastery on these other ones while we're teaching them new skills. So they're mastering and learning new skills at the same time. It's a much faster way, and I think it works better with the brain. I mean, the brain I feel like it gets bored. If you're staying on the same thing for too long, they're like,
yeah, you lose interest in, that interleaving and spiraling is just so critical too. What do you think? Because that mastery is a really, really, really big one that keeps coming up. And to me, I'm like, wait a minute, we're going to master whatever sound until you go, how do we do that? How does that work? How can you move along? In my mind, because I've never done that, but you had that experience with the OG. How do you think you help people shift from that? Oh, we've got mastery to the interleaving more. How do you feel that works?
Ooh, that is harder. Sometimes I just tell them to try. I'm like, you're gonna.
I wonder what I really am curious about. What flips that switch to where it is, because it's a real big sticking point. That one's a really big one.
I have a couple videos that I send about study skills, and they're short videos, and one of them is about interleaving. And I was like, this is exactly what EBLI does with the interleaving, that you do small chunks of activities and you don't do the same order every time. And and it just, the brain learns better. They've done lots of research on it, that you will actually, if you study that way, if you learn that way, it's much faster.
Well, maybe would you share those videos? I'll put them at the bottom of the, when we put this on YouTube, I will put that in the description at the bottom.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's great. Yeah. And I think too, for me, like make it stick when that book came out in like 2015, I'm like, hey, we've been teaching this way all these years. That's so cool to see, to get that validation type of thing, but it helps that understanding that's from a learning perspective, as opposed to, just literacy, learn all kinds of learning, and how it makes so much sense. And so much of that is counterintuitive to what seems to be logical, and what research shows really, works the best. But, it always sounds good in theory, but the practice part sometimes is, more of a challenge.
And I just tell people, do you think they're not going to get the letter C again just because you moved on? I mean, you're going to get it every time you work with them. They're going to see the letter C, and it's going to be so. Just because you went to a new sound or new whatever, trust me, that's coming back. So I was like, they're going to get it every time anyway, and they're going to learn it as they go. And I think some people are like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then, here it's good, and here it's, and then you start getting those patterns and stuff. Which is cool too. All right, I like this one a lot. You're embarrassed to ask for help. Speak to that.
Yes. And I've seen people post, and they've been through the whole program, and they're like, this kid didn't make any. I'm like, did you ask for help? No.
Yeah.
Please ask for help. So I'm constantly telling people, please make a video of yourself teaching, or send a detailed message of what's going on. What are you seeing? I was like, you will get an answer and you'll get help. And I did that. Everybody is going to end up with, probably fairly early on, with that student, you're just not ready to teach. they have more difficulties than you've ever encountered, or whatever it is. And I had one, it was maybe my third round of students, and I sent a couple emails in. I even talked to you on the phone about her, and got me back on track because she had progressed. She stalled. And I was like, I was getting ready to throw my hands up because I thought, I don't think I can help her. And then you helped me, and she started progressing again. So
Yeah.
I would please ask for help.
Well, and that's the interesting thing too, especially if you're doing intervention, classroom, I mean, you got a whole class of 25, 30 kids, and there's challenges in that, but in some ways it's almost easier than when we're really got those really challenging remediation kids, because they're all different and what those things are that their needs are. And you're like, look at me, I'm going along, all these kids, and they're like, bam, you get one that's like, whoa, wait a minute.
And that's what it felt like.
Yeah, that's not quite, didn't that quite going like it had been. So, being understanding about that, and how you get to that diagnostic and prescriptive, which is, it comes, when you're at the sensory motor level and you're in it and you're just learning it, being diagnostic and prescriptive isn't going to come as easily yet. It always comes, but it's just like anything, once you get more proficient at what you're doing and more automatic, for sure. But yeah, asking for help is really huge. Okay, so it's too soon to move to authentic text. Can you speak to that?
Well, we talked about it a little bit, but really, because they understand how the code works, they're not surprised by anything you show them in the authentic text, because they understand 1, 2, 3, or 4 letters is a sound. Every sound is spelled multiple ways. They just take it in stride. Again, I think it's the adults that have more trouble with this. The kids are like, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's Ed. Oh, all right. And then they just
the other thing, authentic text is highly motivating. Like, we have all those stories in EBLI, and quite frankly, we don't use those. I mean, we have them because we base the instruction on them, and we want to hold the hand of the people and all that kind of stuff. But what we really want you to evolve to, after you've been teaching a while, as you know, you grab any book and you can pull some words out of it and pre-teach it. And then, what we choose for reading is what they're interested in. If you're interested in sharks, we are going to be finding some shark stuff.
Right.
Like, and what's that thing that's, oh my gosh, it's some video game. How could I be blanking on
Minecraft?
There it is. Hey, everybody's got Minecraft. So, you want to read, you want Minecraft, and bring in your little book about, the manual thing. We'll read the Minecraft manual, whatever. So, and that's real motivating, because you want to know the information in there when you're really not too interested in reading about, I don't know.
Diabetes.
Yeah, diabetes. Yeah, that. A lot of good words
North
there.
America.
Yes. Yeah, that interesting. In my opinion, but then again, I'm a nurse. But yeah, a lot of times they're like, no thanks. But they're very intrigued, like, wait a minute, I've just been reading Jim and Tim Swim, and now I'm reading about diabetes. That's pretty motivating for them too. Okay, so
it is fun to see how proud they are of themselves when they read real text.
And my very favorite thing, like, and this happens in different ways, but parents will say, or teachers will say, they picked up the, I don't know, whatever, some directions, or the menu at a restaurant, or a birthday card that they read, or a street sign, or something in the classroom, or whatever, or definitely a book to read, or they raised their hand to read. I mean, to me, that's like, we have moved, because that whole trauma of everything is shifted too. So I think that's really exciting when they, it's not like they're reading War and Peace. They have to, it's a process. And I think that's, some people are like, their fluency isn't 140 words a minute. I'm like, you guys, we've got to get those roots strong in that system, before it even, there's a lot that happens with a plant, right? Before it pops out of the ground. But we're impatient, I think, sometimes. And we're like, we want to look at that end result, and knowing that that's a process too. And there's a lot of good stuff along the way. Be kind to yourself. You talked about that. Take a leap of faith. What would you like to say about that?
That you may not understand everything at the beginning. You're not going to, actually. You're just not going to understand the process completely. So just try it. Just try it as you've been asked to, and see what happens with at least 2 or 3 students. And I think you'll be surprised.
Yeah. And we just beg, just please follow it like a recipe. Do it just with fidelity for one kid, just one group, one classroom, whatever, one time through, so that you won't know unless you try. And the hard thing too is not adding in all of the, especially in a classroom teacher, but really for anybody who's taught a different way. Oh, I got to add in this. Like I just we had a message like, I have to teach those letters in isolation before I can start these first graders and building words. Let me, no, you're going to take a whole bunch of time. It's not meaningful and relevant to the kids. Start at lesson 1 and go. And that's just hard, but they're like, but they need to have those letters in isolation and the sounds in isolation. And I'm like, they don't though. But that's, when the letters lead the instruction, that's really an ingrained mindset, and it's hard to undo for sure. Yes. So yeah, keep it moving.
Yes. Keep the pace going. I had a problem with this. I will admit this openly. I had track 2 and 3 students, and my friend has twin girls, and they were in kindergarten, and they weren't making any progress. It was the middle of the school year. So I started teaching them, and I had never taught track 1 students before. So I was like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And the first 2 lessons, I think I did 2 activities. And I got done with session 2, and I was like, I don't think this is going the way it's supposed to. So I remember posting a question out on the group, and I got feedback of, yeah, you're supposed to be doing like 6 to 8 each time. Oh, yeah, I better pick up that pace. And they did. And again, I was still a little bit stuck, even though I'd had other track 2 and 3 students, I was still a little bit stuck with, well, they don't really even know they don't even know all their letter sounds. Are they really going to be able to do this? They went from the bottom of their class needing to work with a reading specialist within 3 months being at the top of their class. And I only did 9 hours instruction with them. Yeah. And we got through, I think, half.
Wow.
It was half of the activities. And I told their mom, I said, they're fine. Then she came back a couple of weeks later. She's like, they're out of the reading specialist group. They said they're like in the first grade work. And I was like, okay.
Isn't that so? And I love the kindergarten kids because your hair turns a lot grayer all the time to get them to blend at first, those first couple of sessions. But man, because they're a clean slate, we don't have any undoing to do. And they're so much fun for sure. Yeah.
Well, and I thought when I did up T earn way with them, and I was teaching them 1, 2, 3, and 4 letters or a sound, I thought it was going to be this big pushback and da-da-da. They just looked at me like, yeah. I kind of looked at them to wait for the reaction, and they just
you're like, come on, aren't you going to like freak out or something? Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, are you going to keep talking? That's how they looked at me, like, what's happening right now? I was like, oh, you're not having a problem with this. Okay, I got it.
I think that right there is, we should have a sign of that. You're not having a problem with this. I am. And it's so hard for us to see that. Like I've had teachers before say, this makes me so irritated. Like it's so easy for them. And I'm just like, wah, and I'm like, it's okay though. They'll help you along. That's the other good thing is
aren't you glad it's easier for them than you though?
I mean, yeah, you would
think it'd be easier for the students than for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets easier for the adults, but yeah, it's a tricky thing. So anything else that I didn't ask you about as far as little tips to help?
I don't think so.
I think I got through all of them on the sheet. And all of that, I think that is just so critical. We have these things on our EBLI members Facebook page that we did a couple of years ago where they're called teacher features. And I probably should bring those back and sometime when I have some time, but where veteran teachers who have taught a lot of EBLI talk about, this is what I wish I knew this, and you can search them in our Facebook, but this is what I wish I knew when I started, now that I've been teaching it 3 or 5 or 10 years type of thing. I wish I knew this. And, so that new teachers can read that and say, oh, okay. And it's classroom teachers and intervention teachers and all different grade levels, because you don't know at first what you don't know and what's even going to, hey, you're just like, here I am going off a cliff when I don't know what's ahead of me here. So as it unfolds, but yeah, that trusting the process. Now I want to talk a little bit about your implementing EBLI. Okay. And I know you have such great processes, and you had told me about, like, here's the deal. I have my parents, you're going to do these things. And if you don't, you have a lot of people on a waiting list like we do too, but we're not quite, we don't do that, but we're actually have a meeting tomorrow about what kind of things can we say, you must do these before you come. What we do is we recommend our apps, our supercharged lessons, our alphabet stuff. And a lot of times when we call people who have been on our waiting list, that we have 150 to 60 people typically at all times on our waiting list, but when they come up, and it's, sometimes 6 months to a year, well, they'll say, you know what, I did the things that you told me, and they don't need instruction anymore. They're really doing well. Do you have that happen?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
what we find, with them, which is really, really pretty cool. So will you talk a little bit about, like you've got here, the initial parent communication? Because people, especially who do private practice, they're like, do you have a contract that they sign?
I don't. I used to, but I find that I haven't needed it, so I just stopped using it. But
Okay.
I pick my parents very carefully. People probably comment. I don't, when I do this process, I'm not interviewing the student. I'll take pretty much any student, except I don't do English second language.
Oh, you should try one of those, Nikki, because I think you would think that's fun. That's real fun.
Is it? Okay.
Really fun.
Well, maybe
and
I'll
they move, especially we've had Hebrew, Spanish, Arabic. There's another one, but it's just interesting to me how they almost move faster than English, as the first language kids. It's very interesting. I don't know why, but
maybe someday I'll be brave enough.
Yeah.
But I'm not really interviewing the student. I'm actually interviewing the parent, and they don't know that, but that's really what's happening.
So what do you ask them when they call, or when you?
So I usually get a message through my business page, or sometimes it's directly from people in EBLI community. And, I'll just talk to them for a long time. We actually have an exchange for a long time. I'll let them tell their story. It tells me a lot about a parent, about the way they tell their story and what they've been through, about what kind of parent I'm dealing with, to be honest. So that's part of it. Plus, I really do want to know their story. So we'll talk for a long time about their child and what they see. And then I give them my expectations. Like, this is what I expect my parents to do. And I'll end that with, you know what, I understand this isn't everybody's style. And if it isn't yours, I will send you a list of available tutors. Would you like me to send you a list? So that's where it goes.
That do that?
Some of them do. Yep, some do. And I'm fine with that, because I get it. Not every parent's willing to do what I am expecting them to do. And I'm fine. I would rather end it now and help you find somebody who will work with you the way you want to be worked with. So that some people jump off right there. Then I will send a questionnaire. If we've decided, okay, the expectations are there and they're fine, I'm fine. I send them a questionnaire. And then they're still not on my wait list at this point. Depending on how long it takes them to answer the questionnaire and how they answer it, will determine whether they make it onto my wait list or not.
Interesting. Wow.
And then at that point, I will take what I've learned from them in the conversation and the questionnaire, and I will send them a list of training steps and activities that they can do with their child to help work on their child's foundational weaknesses. And then I will check back with them about every month. How's it going? Where are you in the training? What are you noticing? Do you have any questions? And if they haven't done anything,
they're off their list.
We part ways very amicably. Hey, you know what? Our styles are the same. Here's a list of tutors. I think you should check on this list. You'll find somebody who the two of you will work together well. And I would rather part ways early than to get into tutoring their child and there be all this tension and problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have them do the handwriting. You have them do the EBLI apps. What kind of things do you ask for them to do?
Do you mean in the questionnaire or in the training?
Before they get started.
So based on the questionnaire, I find out things like, do they have expressive receptive language disorder? Do they have working memory issues? Do they have timing issues? Like, can they clap to a metronome? Can they do jumping jacks, skipping, those kinds of things? And then based on all of that, there are some things that everybody pretty much does, which I send them a couple of your intro webinars about, so they understand the process, how this is different. And then almost all of them watch the handwriting webinar, your free one with the Peterson handwriting prompts. And they start, and then I tell them, okay, start doing A to Z with your child once a day, 3 to 5 times a week. And they start that. And then it depends on where the child is on the reading level and what weaknesses they have is what they do next, what comes next. So it's very tailored to each child. A couple things I always put on there are like the EBLI spelling mini course. And then they start those activities, and we had talked about it earlier. So people are probably going to be like, I can't believe you're getting ready to say this. I have them go through the Reading Simplified main course, the parents. And 2 reasons for that, we talked about this earlier, is that there's a phonemic awareness course for the parent, so the parent can learn to segment. Because many of these parents, they also have language deficits and they don't know how to segment. So they can't really work with their child unless they know. So Reading Simplified has a course that teaches parents how to segment. And then within the main, yeah, it is.
And I love Marnie. She and I, people think we're weird, us structured linguistic literacy people, because we really uplift and support each other. And, we we need all of the people that we can get, you know, to get to these kids. So I have no issue with that.
It's part of what I love about this community. I
Yeah.
don't feel like everybody's at each other's
Yeah.
throat, which is lovely. The other activity that I have the parents start implementing immediately is the switch it. That's a very easy activity.
That's a free activity that they can, yep,
Yes.
that's a good plan.
And it's easy, it's a high powered. So basically the child has already started on handwriting, working memory, if they have that trouble. Hopefully they've started switch it even before I start working with them. So they're already starting to work on phonemic awareness. So these are the things that
And I see you have like do you have them do the supportive reading or wait until later in the EBLI apps? What else do you have on there?
EBLI apps, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually pretty high up on the list. I think that might be right after handwriting, might be when I send the EBLI apps. So I don't know, I'm trying to remember what it is. And then, yeah, I usually do try to get them to do the supported mini course, but I can't remember what order that comes in.
Yeah, that was in your list here. It's last that I see.
Oh, okay.
But see, you know, and the thing of it is having different people with different approaches too. Like you say, you send them to other tutors that they, you know, teach them, and people can do some of these. They don't have to do all of these. And I always had the mindset here at our center that I tell our interventionists, here's the deal. You're teaching the child. You're not teaching. We're not here. The parent's not here for us to teach that. You know what I mean? We're going to do this as if they have nobody that's going to support them because they're the one that's, but you having that, I mean, as an added bonus for sure. And of course we train our parents and teach them things when they're, but some will come and drop their kids off and they don't even come in, you know, right. And, you know, and it works, but definitely what you're talking about and saying and doing there is going to help a lot more when there is that involvement. And we try to, you know, that's like with the spelling and the reading course, where like, here's the deal. They say the wrong word, tell them the word and then have them say the sounds because they're the ones saying the sounds type of thing. But yeah, so it's just interesting to listen to your expectations and knowing that they're, you know, you put the bar, it's like everybody, you put the bar and they raise it, you know, they reach it. So that's
well, and some of the parents don't like it, and that's fine. There are tutors that won't expect the same things I do, which is good.
Right. And it's okay to have, you know, different expectations. Now in your stuff that your recommendations, you have a lot of things that are talking about online instruction. So just for everybody to know, we're not going to go over those in here because I'm going to include all those in our after the lessons that will come out in October of 2023. That you can go in there and we have everything that everybody's given feedback about. As far as use this or do that, or this is a good idea. We're going to put those in there and we give credit to the people who have shared them too. So we appreciate that. And I think this, your questionnaire, you know, with some links in it, is okay with you if I share that in the, you know, description as a link so that we can do that so that people can check it out. And
I've updated it if you want the updated one.
Oh yeah. Send the updated one if you will. And then the other thing I want you to talk about, which is near and dear to my heart, is these, you know, when we talk about executive function and cognitive processing and memory and processing speed and all of those things that are kind of, you know, they're sprinkled in throughout, you know, throughout the Etzel, and we kind of just plop them in there and check this out if the kids need it type of thing. What are the things? I like the memory one because we know that getting to that 5 seconds of working memory is really, really critical. So tell me about the things that you share with parents, because these are games, many of them are games like we did as kids and, you know, that are fairly easy to do, but they require a little coaching. And I'm curious about how you coach the parents to coach the kids on those too. So
I have a document that I send them with the 4 activities, which I think
yeah, I've got that. When you said you do the EBLI the memory for numbers that we do.
Right.
Okay.
So that's part of the training. That part is in the training.
Yep.
And then I give them an example of the going to the store game.
Yes. Yep.
So
which is such a great thing to do in the car. I mean, I've always done that in the car with, you know,
yeah, and that's what I tell them. Hey, you can do this while you're at the store.
Yeah.
Running errands, whatever, in the car. Yeah. So it's an easy game and it does help their memory. The other is the game Simon. That game when I was a kid. So it's not real expensive on Amazon. You can buy it.
Yeah, that's very good one too.
And the last one is the concentration card game, where you have maybe 10 pairs of cards and you only get to turn over 2 and you're trying to find matches. So you have to remember where you saw the cards.
Yep. I love that. We were in Hershey, Pennsylvania with my daughter and son-in-law and 3 of my grandkids, and they're 2 and 10 months, twins. But I bought a little concentration, it's like all the candy, like Reese's and Kisses and all that. So it's like, you match the 2 things. But I feel like with my brain, that's a great game. Still, for sure. So yeah, helping that memory and stretching that memory and, all of those things to understand like you say, then we talked with clapping to a metronome. One of the things we do with all of our kids, we ask them to do 5 jumping jacks. Now, when you have a student who struggles with reading and you ask them, we'll have parents will be like, what is going on? And we break it down just like we do with EBLI. Okay, put your arms down and your legs together. Watch me first. Now, arms up, legs out. I'm going to do it. Now you do it. And we break it down. And then pretty soon, when those jumping jacks get fluent, it's amazing how it transfers to that, fluency in reading. So those kinds of things too, that a lot of times I saw a comment somewhere. It's just like, I'm going to wait until I get through all the whole track before I do any of the cognitive stuff. I'm like, ugh, you'd be doing a lot more, you would speed up the process a lot more by doing that.
Yes.
Do you do interactive metronome? Are you one?
I have one student doing it right now and another one that's getting ready to, and they're the ones that the boy can't do jumping jacks still. They've been working on it for 6 weeks and he can't get jumping jacks.
Do you work on it with them? Do you do it?
No,
but are you virtual? Huh?
I sent her a video. It's like a 5-step video. You have them lay on the ground at first and do their legs. And then I think it's just their arms. And then you have them do both just on the ground. So it's like an angel, a snow angel. So it's like this whole process, which she said he's doing better now with that. Like he's being able to work through the steps. Cause I was like, what else am I going to have to do? So,
it's tricky. It really is tricky. And then when you start to speed it up, it's just like, whoa, wheels falling off. You got to back it down and let's just do 1 and then do 2. And yeah, that's on our to-do list of a whole lot more videos of, we have a lot of things that we do here that train those, executive function and cognitive things that really, they're all free. But it's the key is not, like people will say sometimes with the handwriting, oh, I had them go off and do the handwriting. No. This is supported where every time they make an error, which they did, if they've done the assessment, you have to give them that supportive, if it's hand over hand, or you're doing it right next to them or giving them some dots or whatever. But yeah, so that,
so I, like you said, I would tell people don't skip those cognitive ones when they come in, because I find the students that struggle the most and seem to be the slowest progression, they usually fall into that group. I only have one student that hasn't, and I'm getting ready to send you an email about him because I'm like, I need help with this kid. But he doesn't have any of the normal foundational weaknesses. So I'm like, I need to figure out, is there something else I'm missing with him? But most of the kids that I have that are the slower ones, it's because they either have a working memory issue or something with this timing.
Yeah. The timing and rhythm, people don't understand how critical that is. Now, I used to go when my kids were in school, they'd have dances, like the 6th grade dance at graduation. I never forget my one daughter. I was a chaperone at the dance, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know Jenna had difficulties with learning. She's like, Mom, don't look, because you can tell they don't clap to a beat that, I can walk into a classroom and know by having them do some, physical activity, like give me that one, and that one. Those are going to be the ones that the teacher will be like, how did you know? That's, but it's just really interesting. Kids, sometimes they'll lean against the wall and walking down. I mean, I can't not see this when I'm in a mall or wherever. It's a little bit, it's almost just like you have some sort of a whatever, but all of those things are.
And you want to help them.
Yes, I do. I want to say, come over here and let me do some stranger in the mall. Right. People are like, who is this crazy person? So anything else that you would like to share for others? You are a wealth of information, and I just love, your passion and
I think that was it.
Yeah, you have really helped a bunch of people, and this will too. And I think that, there's hopefully not overwhelming to people, but just, opening up their mind to, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, or I forgot about that. That's the other thing as you're going through the training. It's like, oh man, there's a lot of things going on here. And
Right.
it's easy to forget about some of them too. So,
Right.
um,
I think the thing that we forgot was that a lot of these things that I did for my process took me, it's taken me over a year to develop. It's not
yeah,
something necessarily a new person would do. It'd be a little overwhelming,
yeah,
but it might be that as you get more experience, a
right,
couple of these things you might think, oh, I want to try something.
right. And this is where we're working on doing, we're actually going to have, our basic certification, which is our training, and then practicum, mid-level certification, and then an advanced one, which in that one, I'm going to do a lot, because to me and my nurse's brain and my, how do we grow that brain? And a lot of times it's people will say, oh, I'm doing this instruction and they're not getting it. So let's jump off to a whole different type of, of approach to teaching reading. It's like, no, that's not it. It may be more repetition, but a lot of it is that cognition and those, the ability to, do those, like we'll do things like line dancing and teaching kids how to do that crossover and so many things like that too, that are what
That's interesting.
we Cody, who we did a video on, he's now a father, but I taught him when he was in second grade, Lucinda, who is our training coordinator, her son, and he had seizures at 4 years old and literally had 0 seconds of working memory, none. And I started him when he was 8. And I would say I have worked with him 181 hours. That goes to show that. And he did IM, but I learned so much from him. But we would do line dancing and I had tape on the floor and I'd be like, okay, Cody, I was on the front line. He was on the back line. I'm like, we're going to stand here, step to the right, and I'd have to watch him to see that he's taking that right foot and putting it over here to this side. Now this one, and we're going to cross over. I mean, and we got to be pretty good at that line dancing and the country music thing. So we could do it, but it took, you just really have to have that patience to break it down and then bring it up and make it fluent for sure. But there's a lot of things. There's a perceptual development. That was a course out of New York that I took that taught me a lot of things. There's just so many things. I always look at a student and they, think of a puzzle, like what are these pieces that we need to put together here and here and here. And I see that you're doing that too, which is fun. You don't do all these things with everybody. It's like these ones need it and these ones don't. And these ones need different things. And so it's a process for sure.
It is. And I have a new one I need help with.
All right. Well, let me know what it is. And I like the puzzle. So I'll see what I can share with you. Well, thank you so much for, again, being generous and gracious and sharing with everybody all of your experience. Anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah. Do EBLI faithfully. And just do what you're asked and try it. Just try it. That's what I want to tell people.
And have fun. I always am like, have fun. Do the Nike thing, just do it and have fun.
Right.
I love when I hear people saying, oh, my kids, my students just had so much fun and they just love it and that kind of thing. And I'm having fun as a teacher.
Right. It is a much funner way to teach than structured literacy.
Yeah.
It's less of a burden. It's more fun to teach. You can tell it's more fun for the kids. I'm like, to me, it's an overall win, and they progress faster. So what's not to like?
Exactly. Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much, my dear. I appreciate you sharing, and we will share those links to all your great resources too, and help, other people, pay you paying it forward is really grand to help others so they don't have to. That's what I always think. You don't need to go through the same, all of that, reinventing the wheel that we have done before. So thanks so much. I appreciate it, Nikki.
This was fun.
Yeah, it was great fun.